بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala falah. Hayya ala falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Sorry, I noticed I had left my notes on the table. The Holy Quran, I will start with chapter 29, verses 1 to 3. Which is Surah Al-Ankabut. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alif Lam Mim. أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. Alif Lam Mim is part of Rufe Muqatat, and Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali has translated that as I, Allah, am the best knower. Do men think that they will not, do men think that they will be left alone on saying we believe and they will not be tried? And indeed, we tried those before you. So Allah will certainly know those who are true, and He will know the liars. I also want to recite to you verses 153 to 157 of Al-Baqarah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ista'inu bis-sabri was-salati innallaha ma'as-sabirin. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim. O you who believe, seek assistance through patience and prayer. Surely Allah is with the patient. And speak not of those who are slain in Allah's way as dead. Nay, they live, but you perceive not. And we shall certainly try you with something of fear and hunger and loss of property and lives and fruits. But give good news to the patient who, when a misfortune befalls them, say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Surely we come from Allah, surely we are Allah's, and to Him we shall return. These are they on whom are blessings and mercy from their Lord, and those are the followers of the right course. These and other verses came to mind when I heard about the murder of the journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, murdered by Israeli soldiers. Shireen was killed in Palestine. She was murdered in Palestine. Now, the interesting thing is that Shireen lived in New Jersey in the United States, and she was an American citizen. There was no outcry in the US Congress or the Senate. No emergency meetings were called, no resolutions were put forward, nothing. There was no outcry in the British Parliament. Indeed, nowhere in the West did any institution, did any government, did any parliament even raise her murder by the Israeli army. Why? Because she was a Palestinian. And we all know that the life of a Palestinian is worth less than a used tissue for the people in the West. They're in the same position, if not worse, than the slaves on American plantations. And what was her fault? What had Shireen done for which she needed to be murdered? Brutally murdered. She was exposing the brutality of the Israeli state, the Israeli army and the police, their brutality and the persecution of the Palestinian people and the arrogance with which they did it. But then, yesterday my wife and I, we were walking down the road and someone had littered the road. And we just picked up that litter and we put it in the rubbish bin. That might as well have been Shireen or any Palestinian, really. Not only was she murdered, but the mourners who went to her funeral, they were also attacked by the Israeli police. Nothing was said in the media. It may have been a 10-second clip on the BBC and other news outlets. But compare that with Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered, brutally murdered in Turkey. For weeks, all news outlets, radio and television and newspapers and so on, carried the news of his murder prominently on front pages as the main news items. And there was an outcry in the West, to the extent that even recently, the American, I forgot his exact designation, but he deals with security matters, raised Khashoggi's case with Prince Salman. And Prince Salman threw him out of the meeting and so on. But you might think this is an odd case. Things can go wrong, they can happen when there are rallies and so on and so forth. But as I pointed out in an earlier khutbah, Israel is actually an apartheid state. Just like in South Africa, the black people living there was worth less than a piece of dirt or an animal to the government and the police and the army there. It is the same. It is the same in Israel. Just like in South Africa, this discrimination, this hatred was instituted in law and by law. It is the same in Israel. Did you know that in Israel there are certain roads and streets where only Jews can go? The Palestinian is not allowed to walk down those roads. There's police and military at the end of those roads that will turn you away. We talk about international law. And international law says this and international law says that. Israeli settlements have been declared illegal in international law, by international courts. Does the British Prime Minister take this issue up with the Israeli ambassador or the Israeli Prime Minister? Of course he doesn't. Does the American President or Secretary of State do that? Of course they don't. Now, at the same time that these illegal settlements are being built to house Jewish communities, Palestinian homes are being bulldozed. And it's very funny. It's, what they call catch-22. A Palestinian applies for a building permit to build a house. Who does he apply to? To the Israelis. Do they answer it? Usually they don't even answer it. They just throw his application in the bin. Years go by and there's no reply. If he's lucky, he'll be told, no, you can't build a house there. So he builds a house. And that is immediately declared illegal construction, and the bulldozers go in and bulldoze the house. And when Israelis appear on television, they make an innocent face and they say, but it was illegal construction. How can you expect us to allow lawlessness in Israel? Hang on. What about the illegal settlements that you have built, that the International Court has said they're illegal settlements? When are the bulldozers going to go and knock them down? No one asks that question. But of course, another interesting thing is this, that in some cases, Palestinians are thrown out of the house under the watchful eye of the Israeli police by civilian Israelis. Why are they thrown out? Because it's an illegal construction. And what happens immediately afterwards? Yes, an Israeli family moves in. So when the Palestinians were living there, it was, what was it? Illegal construction. They got thrown out as soon as the Israeli family moved in, suddenly, miraculously. But who says miracles don't happen? Who says miracles don't happen? Miraculously, that illegal construction, which couldn't be occupied by a Palestinian, becomes legal because it is now occupied by an Israeli. And all of this happens under the watchful eye of the so-called Israeli justice system, or should I call it Israeli injustice system, and the police. Israel has built a huge wall. It's 25 feet high. It's built of thick concrete. It's built on Palestinian territory. Isn't it odd? And in doing this, a Palestinian had a house and piece of land. And the Israeli government simply built this wall, and what happens is that the Palestinian's house is on one side of the wall, and his land that he cultivated to earn a living is on the other side of the wall. So how is he going to cultivate that land? Isn't it strange that a Pole or a Russian or an American who's never been to Israel, whose father has never been to Israel, the last 10 generations of family haven't been to Israel, but he can simply pick up his passport, get a letter from his rabbi, in Boston or Moscow or Warsaw and land at Tel Aviv airport, and he'll be allowed in and he can live there. And yet, Palestinians who were forcibly removed from that land 50 years ago, they're not allowed back. And those Palestinians, their generations, their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers lived in that land. They can't go back. But a Polish person whose family may never have, and I'm talking about family in the sense of 10 generations, 20 generations ago, been to Israel, he is entitled. When Muslims cry, what happens? They're immediately targeted as being Jew haters. Yes. And suddenly pictures of Auschwitz and other places are brought out. So look what happened to us. But the saddest part of the whole saga is that many Muslim governments are falling over themselves to recognize Israel without even mentioning the torture and persecution of Palestinians. Did any of these Muslim governments who recognized Israel recently, did they protest? Did they recall their ambassadors? No. When we treat our people with such disrespect, how can we expect any other community, any other country to treat us with respect? This is why Muslims are humiliated the world over. But let me end by asking you one question. People always blame Ahmadis and Masih Maud, the Prophet's Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib alayhi salam. And they say, well, he abolished jihad. Why aren't you doing any jihad against Israel? Come on, brothers. Palestinians are being persecuted, they're being tortured, they're being killed, they're being dispossessed. Their possessions are being misappropriated by the Israeli authorities. And what are you doing? You are recognizing the government that is actually doing it. None of you are rushing for jihad. None of you are declaring that you are ready to lay down your lives for the sake of Palestinians. Is your jihad only limited to making announcements that the promised Messiah abolished it? He didn't. But that's another story. We'll go into that another time. God is punishing us for our hypocrisy. As I started by saying, that God, do men think that they'll be left alone on saying we believe and they will not be tried? You are being tried. And God says, we shall certainly try you with something of fear and hunger and loss of property and lives and fruits. Isn't this what's happening? Now, what is your reaction? Yes, one thing is that God says, be patient, pray, struggle. But God also says, be united, be together. Rather than fighting each other, Fight your persecutors, your torturers. Look at all the Muslim countries. Is any Muslim country standing up for the rights of the Palestinians? Every single Muslim country has politicians fighting each other to become the prime minister and the president and the ministers and this and that and line their own pockets. You, I say, shame on all of you. And to the people in the street, I say this: if you can't do anything, if you can't do anything else, please at least cry for Palestine and remember those people in your prayers. Allah, it may be that Allah hears one of your prayers and eases the burden of those poor people who are standing up for the glory of Islam and being beaten and tortured and persecuted. Will you at least join me in doing that, if nothing else? Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malikun barraufur rahim. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah. Qad qamatis salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, Siratal Amin. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahu Akbar. Sami'allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim, ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Qul a'udzu birabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas, min syarril waswasil khannas, alladzi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, minal jinnati wan nas. Allahu Akbar. Sami'allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Assalamualaikum wa rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Min kulli dhanbi wa atubu ilayh. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan. Allahumma anka salam wa minka salam. Tabarak. Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. And I again urge you that if you can't do anything else, in every prayer, remember your Palestinian brothers and sisters who are undergoing immense difficulties. With the prayer that whoever you are and wherever you may be, may Allah keep all of you safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.